Welcome, Rinkcast, to this Blackhawks Hockey Rinkcast, episode 42. Exclusively sponsored by the premium hockey outfitters at puckhockey.com. That's PUCKHCKY.com. Use discount code THERINK, and you can head over there. They got some new collections coming out, I saw. One of them is if you're a real extreme heavy metal guy or girl, person, whatever your gender pronoun is, you could get over there. They're going to be, there's a Cannibal Corpse line that I saw is coming out, and I believe they have 3 other lines as well. I don't have those off the top of my head, but I know at least that one. I did see Cannibal Corpse, which is a little extreme for my taste, but yeah. But anyway, that's puckhockey.com. Get over there, get your stuff. So today is Wednesday, January 16th, 2019. I'm Jeff Osborn, better known across the interwebs as Gatekeeper.
Who could be scared of a Jeffrey?
Yeah, Jeffrey's just this nice bloke from down the road, isn't he? That's the joy of the Jeffrey, you see. It goes away, but then it comes back.
Those are my new clips. I'm joined by my good friend, co-host, and fellow grumpy old guy, Mr. John Jaeckel. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, what's happening?
Hey.
Lock it up!
We had quite a day, but we'll talk about that later.
We did.
Also on the line, we have someone who you may all be very familiar with today, which is Aaron Goldschmidt.
He's a very bad boy.
From Smoky, Denver. Our boy, Aaron Goldschmidt, our NCAA expert. He put out an article this morning, and it seemed to have raised some eyebrows, so we're going to talk about that a little later. But together, all of us are your most trusted sources at your favorite online hangout, the-rink.com. So, before we get into the Aaron stuff, before we get into the fun and games, today on the program we have Al Cimaglia, who is the Blackhawks correspondent at NHL Network Radio. You hear him probably with Boomer. He's on with Boomer a lot. We spent about almost an hour, just under an hour with him, talking Blackhawks, talking all kinds of good stuff. Al's a great guy. I respect the hell out of him. I know John does too. Kind of talk about that a little bit, but Al has got a lot of great insights, and he knows his Blackhawks, and he knows his horses, and he knows his real estate too. So it's at Al Cimaglia. We'll tag everything in the podcast episode. So before we get into
very mellifluous speaking voice.
Yeah, mellifluous. Yeah.
That's heard on NHL radio and now on the Rinkcast.
Yeah, and we're planning on probably having him on a little more often. If things work out properly, we're going to have him on hopefully more. Maybe more. Who knows? So that being said, let's go. Let's talk to Al for a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll have the fun and games. So take it away, Al. So you may have heard him on NHL Network Radio with Boomer. I know he goes on with Boomer a lot, but we have Al Cimaglia, who has been a long time coming on the line. How you doing, Al?
I'm doing well, and it's great to be with you, Jeff, and always good to talk with John as well.
Well, we're really glad to have you. You're a guy who I've kind of looked up to. I've mentioned it before. Kind of looked up to for a while since I started writing a while ago, but I really respect the stuff you do and love listening to you on NHL Network Radio. And you have a lot of great insight on the Blackhawks. You actually have a lot of great insight on the Ponies, too. If anyone's interested in that, follow Al on Twitter.
That's right.
At Al Cimaglia. So.
That's right. It's good stuff. Al, it's great to have you on. We had Justin Lowe, a.k.a. Tyler Cameron, on last week, so it's kind of sort of a Hockey Buzz reunion theme for the last couple of weeks. And some of you may not remember this. Is going back a ways, but Al was my predecessor at Hockey Buzz and was part of my getting that gig there. And we've maintained a great friendship over the years. And like Jeff, I have tremendous respect for his work and his insights and points of view. And we're going to have some good hockey discussion tonight.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that started writing on there about a dozen years ago, and just a handful of people, and you were one of them, John, that used to follow in the beginning. And before I did it, they didn't have anyone covering the Blackhawks. So things have changed a lot over the years for sure. It's been a nice ride watching things progress in many ways, and now we're kind of on the downswing a little bit, but we'll see how we'll see when things bottom out. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you look at that lineup, you go from Al to John to Tyler. I mean, that's a pretty good lineup there of three in a row right there. So
he's doing a great job, and he sort of I passed the baton to him at a time when the team was starting to take a downward turn. It's pure coincidence, but he's really done a nice job keeping the readership and the participation up, and he has a lot of great perspectives. So I mean, those guys have been really lucky for, I think, well, maybe there's about a 7-year window of not as good as the other two guys, but
it was interesting to see how that site really progressed too over the years, everything has to come together. And I mean, when I did it, it was the real diehards, and there was a lot of hate and a lot of angst, and it was interesting to see how things turned around and how the bar was raised and expectations were raised.
Yeah, for sure. So, talking a little more about the Blackhawks, I'm just going to rattle off some of where the Blackhawks are at this point in time. They're 16, 23 and 9. They have 41 points. They're tied for 6th in the Central, 28th overall in the NHL. Goal differential is, I believe, right around in the 30s again. That's the one stat I didn't look up, but they've gotten a little better in the faceoff circle. Their PK has gone down, has actually dropped their percentage on the PK, but their power play has gone up dramatically. They're up to 20th in the league, which, when they were down in the 30s, that was pretty bad. So it's taken a lot for them to get to where they are, but they've actually gone up a full percentage point. Goals for 142, they're 14th. Goals against, they're tied for last in the league with 178. And they give up 34.9, so almost 35 shots a game, which is tied for last in the league. And then the possession, they're like in the 20s to 25 range for Corsi and Fenwick. Their high danger save percentage, they actually dropped in the last week. Since the last time I looked at these stats, they dropped 5 spots actually from 5 to 10. At 82% in high danger save percentage. And then their 5-on-5 save percentage went down just a little bit too, and they're down to 19th. So they're kind of coming right back down to earth. But I mean, what's your opinion, Al? What do you think about this team? Where are they in real terms?
Well, I mean, you said a mouthful with the goal differential. I mean, as much as the metrics have gotten better, the analytics to look at, and they're fun to look at. I mean, if you just take it down to two basic things, 5-on-5 play and goal differential, they're horrible. And it shows, so they've had a little bit of an upswing. I think the goaltending was better for a bit and carried them and helped carry them, and the power play came alive. Delia's been, he's been good. No complaints. He's been very good. Last 4 games, he's a little bit coming back down to earth, maybe a little bit. But, I mean, it's too early to judge the kid. He's only played 10 NHL games. I think, a lot has been made of Gustafson on the power play, and I think he has some ability there, no doubt, to help them. But I think a big contributor, even though he might not get points, a big contributor has been since they've gotten Strome. Mm-hmm. And I think there's been some additions that have helped them, no doubt. I really don't understand sometimes what they're trying to do on the ice as far as how they're trying to play. Colleton seems to be kind of hell-bent on the defensive side of the game, which obviously they need that, but their defensive
it's not working.
Or shallow. It's tough, and I don't know. I think it's easier in today's game to teach a team how to play defense than to get them to score. And the Hawks are lacking in both ends. So I don't know, the Islanders last year, they were a lot of fun to watch. They scored a lot of goals. They stayed in the race, with the made-for-TV point system. They stayed in it for quite a while, but their goal differential was always terrible. Now this year, they've learned how to play defense. They're still, they're sitting in a good spot right now. But the difference between the Islanders and the Hawks, they've got 8 players that are in double-digit goals. The Hawks have 4. So the depth of scoring isn't there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a facade on this team that maybe the writers, it might not even be necessarily the league, but a lot of the writers are writing about, like this the great Eric Gustafson. And it seems to come up every week for us now, how good Eric Gustafson is and how valuable he is. And while, yeah, sure, he could score 7 goals as a defenseman, which is nice, and 5 of those are on the power play, but he gives up more high danger chances than any defenseman in the league. It's hard to try to explain this to people when they want to just look at goals for, and they don't want to look, any deeper than, Eric Gustafson doing a swan in front of, or a flamingo in front of a shot and screening his own goalie and just being a nightmare in his own end. What is your opinion on the great Eric Gustafson?
Well, I mean, I'll go back to last year. I liked Gustafson more than Jan Rutta and Forsling. But in context, I thought last year, the same people that are writing about how great Gustafson was, they had Forsling winning, the Norris Trophy, in a number 1 pairing with Jan Rutta. So there seems to be an appetite always to cling on to someone and find a hero here and to really bolster a young kid. And a lot of times, I'm not saying it puts too much pressure on them, but the expectations aren't substantiated, at some point. Gustafson, I think the overall problem is there's no number 1 or number 2 defenseman on the team. Now, I'm saying this in regards to being a high-quality playoff team.
Yeah.
So on a quality playoff team, Gustafson is a number 5 who plays the power play.
Yeah.
Or maybe a number 4 on some nights. Gustafson is, I don't know what his top end will be, his abilities and stuff. I don't know. I'm not going to guess and try to figure that out. But right now, it seems like he's more of a player like a Dougie Hamilton, who a lot of people thought, wow, he scored 50 points, scored 43 points. He was in the 40s again in 2017, 2018. And now he's on Carolina, who's got a decent defense. And basically some nights he plays 18, 19 minutes, and some nights he plays 15. And he's not really, those aren't top pairing minutes. So I think it's a little bit unfair to Gustafson in the fact that he's on the ice for 23, 25 minutes. It's too much. The more you're on the ice, the more apt you are to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And he makes enough mistakes, as we've said. So on a different team where he could be spotted differently, I think, he would be able to basically hone his skills a little bit better. He wouldn't be out there against the toughest matchups. I go back a long time and go back to the beginning of the ride. And what people forget is Brent Seabrook and Duncan Keith, they were the foundation. They were here before Taves and Kane.
Yep.
And it took really an incredible, it was a lot of, how can I put it? It wasn't only natural athletic ability. They had to be 2 mentally tough players because they played a lot of minutes and the team was horrible. And Brent Seabrook basically had no time in the AHL. So once they got their legs under them and it didn't crack them, which it does to a lot of younger players, especially younger goalies or defensemen who are put in positions to really have trouble with, that are placed above their abilities at the time. You lose every night. You're on the ice for a lot of goals. It could be a bit much. Those guys withstood everything and turned out to be outstanding hockey players. Now, what will happen like with a Gustafson? I don't know. Maybe he's the type of guy that shrugs off, being on the ice for a lot of goals. He seems to be he strikes me as a player, and I think Colleton made some comments the other day. He was referring to Gustafson. Gustafson looks at himself as an offensive defenseman, plus, I think. Okay, but you can't be on the ice for that many minutes if you give up so many chances. And that's where what's going to be the catch-22 with him. The longer he plays, the more apt he is to make a mistake. Overall, they don't have the passing from the back end. For the most part, it doesn't steer their offense like it did years ago. They need to really concentrate on that in the off season. I think they have to find a couple of defensemen. I was surprised they started this year with what they had. I know there's young kids coming, but again, they're young kids. So I think they need to find someone that, whether it's more of a Hjalmarsson type of player, really two of those players, if they can find it somehow.
Yeah,
that's what they need, because everyone would be slotted more accordingly. Like the kid Dahlstrom, he looks pretty good, but they kind of shelter him a little bit more. Whereas Gustafsson, he's on the ice too much.
Al, it's funny. I've been saying this for weeks, at least the last 2 or 3 weeks. They not only need one Nicholas Hjalmarsson, they really almost need two, and for exactly the reason you said, to slot guys properly. I also think that you can play a guy like Gustafsson the kind of minutes you're playing him if you have a partner like a Hjalmarsson to anchor him and cover for him, not unlike, what Hjalmarsson used to do for Brian Campbell.
Right.
But they do, and Dahlstrom, there are aspects of his game. He's definitely more of a stay-at-home, responsible guy, and he and Murphy had a good game actually the other night. Of all the defensemen, they were actually in plus territory. But I don't think that Dahlstrom is at the same level, or is going to be at the same level as Nicholas Hjalmarsson. But because you're right, all these young guys they have coming. There's no guarantee that they're all going to pan out, number one. And number two, they're all really those very small puck rushing defensemen who the scouting on all of them is they're not really good in their zone. And they really need that guy who's going or guys who are going to be strong and reliable in their own end. And I don't see anybody coming in the organization who fits that except maybe Dahlstrom, but I'm just not sure how good he's going to be.
Right. And it's troubling sometimes when you have a lot of players that seem to be cut out of the same mold.
Yeah.
And now they've gone to the extreme with a lot of younger guys coming that are all defensemen. And even if three of them turn out to be very good NHL players, that works against you at some point also, because you're not going to be able to keep them all.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see how they maneuver here. And I know, I guess a lot of people don't, maybe they don't have the same outlook that I do, from the standpoint that, I think this would be a profound mistake to waste this draft and this summer. And now's the time where you position yourself to be able to take advantage of what might be out there, because, we didn't really know. I mean, we saw good things coming. I saw Jonathan Taves in college, and I was excited, and, they lucked into, by the grace of God, to get Patrick Kane, and then things fell together. But they had some good drafts before that, and a lot of young guys got good at the same time. Mm-hmm. So it can change rather quickly. And now what you're hoping is you almost need it to change rather quickly, because you got a couple of your best players that are on the wrong side of 30 now.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think, a big name needs to go. And I think the easiest guy and the player that may say okay first would be Duncan Keith.
I agree.
Yeah, we both agree. We've been talking about that for probably a couple months now about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be the other factor is what's going to be interesting too, and they're going to have some conversations here because of the state that they're in. Is do these guys really want to stay?
Right.
I mean, they're very comfortable. They're signed. They're hooked up to big contracts for a while. I mean, when you look at Duncan Keith, the jeopardy would be that he'd get traded and retire on someone.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing. But if you look at the way his contract is structured, I think he goes 3.5, 2.5, 2, 1.5. You're going to get you get a guy who could be on a very good team could be a 4 or a 3, and maybe not always a 3, but still, and he could add something to the mix and bring some experience, and you don't really have to pay him much. You got to be able to absorb the cap hit. So, it's funny because now every rumor, Toronto's gotten good, and they have a very good team, and they've got a lot to look forward to, but I don't know where they're going to get the money. They talk about Duncan Keith to the Leafs. I mean, he's still, a $5 million cap hit?
5.5.
Yeah, 5.5.
5.5. And I mean, when you look at who they have to re-sign and everything else, if they re-sign Matthews, and he's got to get, I would think, $10, $11 million, they're almost in the same situation the Hawks were when they had, $10 million to sign 8 players or something. There's not going to be much money left. So I don't know what they're going to do, because they could paint themselves into a nice corner. If the NHL was different, and it still may happen, I mean, if anyone would, had a chance to really be someone to go after and offer sheet him, someone could go offer Matthews and get him, really squeeze the Leafs, because if they were to match, they got to get rid of some players, it would seem. So it's going to be an interesting summer all the way around. And plus, the other dynamic you have working here is you have teams that have been, in the last 8 years, 10 years, have been playoff-bound teams, good teams, cup-winning teams, and now they're not anywhere near where they were. Now, who's going to be the first to really go and start jettisoning some contracts? Is it going to be the Kings? Is it going to be the Blues? Is it going to be the Hawks? You could go down the list, and then there's other teams that need to shake things up too. I mean, the Ducks are not in good shape. They're in bad shape, beside the fact that they've lost, 14 in a row, 12 in a row. I don't even know what it is anymore. But they're another team that's saddled with heavy contracts and injury-prone players, and they're getting older. So it's going to be a lot of scrambling. That's why I would think if something were to happen, I wouldn't wait to the last minute to try to see what you could get for somebody that you want to shed. I can't see why the Hawks would keep Anisimov. If they could get someone to bite on him, he should go. Marcus Kruger's got to go. I mean, as much as he's been a good soldier and he can play well at times now, I mean, for where the Hawks are at, this kid David Camp, he can't score a goal to save his life, but really he's Marcus Kruger in the making. He's kind of that mold. I don't see a reason to have both those guys on the roster. Kruger's a UFA. They're not going to re-sign him. So you would think he would go. Anisimov should have been traded 2 years ago. He's another guy that you would think would go. So it's going to be interesting to see what Stanbo does, because he's not going to be the only one out there trying to make deals and to remodel his club.
My understanding is the Blues have already made it known they're open for business. So, yeah, I mean, Al, you're exactly right. I mean, we keep saying this, and we get a lot of pushback on Twitter over this. If now is the time to restock, and by restock, meaning, move a couple of these bigger contracts if you can, while some of these guys still have some value. And as much as, people, want to run down Keith, I still think at the deadline, a team looking for a veteran defenseman with his experience, you'll get a decent return for him. And the kind of return you'll get for him could be pieces that it could be very important in a rebuild. Anisimov, I would move him for whatever you can get. You're just getting rid of that cap hit and a guy who basically is a third-line left wing at this point. And then, and Kruger, I totally agree. And he may have some value to somebody, some kind of value. Maybe it's nothing more than like a 5th or 6th round pick. But he's not really doing anything for the Hawks at this point in terms of, moving the franchise forward. And that's what the thinking's got to be about. I mean, the argument we keep getting back from people on Twitter is, but you're gonna lose this or you're gonna lose that from the existing team. But the problem is the existing team stinks. It's not going anywhere. And without some fairly significant changes and a much greater and broader infusion of talent, you can expect more of the same, because there's holes all around this roster and all throughout the organization.
Yeah.
I mean,
the big one I was on before he got hurt was, I thought maybe if he could stay healthy and there was a team out there that needed it for the playoff run, maybe Corey Crawford could be. He only had a year and a half left on his contract, but then he goes and gets hurt, which completely throws that off the books. But I was the same as far as Keith goes too.
Yeah, and you know what? I think what people fail to miss here too is there's no role players in Rockford, and there's no top end talent.
Right.
So if the Hawks had other, like this kid Camp, he's a one-dimensional pretty much, but at least he understands how to play. They don't have players that could come up and seamlessly go into the lineup that they're not exposed after a couple of games. And so that's an issue. So that's your overall depth. The difference here now compared to other teams is, Jonathan Taves, he's having a great year. And, on bad teams, someone has to score. And I know people will say, well, you're putting him down. No, not at all. He's having a great year. What I would be looking at is you want to keep Kane and Taves for a number of different reasons. Patrick Kane, anybody could be traded, but unless you got he wouldn't go to a team that, like, let's say he wouldn't go to the Oilers, a team where you could maybe get some very good draft picks and maybe some other players out of their system. So I'm thinking that you hope he doesn't get any serious injuries. He's in great shape, it seems like. You might get another 3 years productivity out of him, maybe even a little bit more. Taves the same way. So, okay, anchor yourself with those two. This kid DeBrincat, I mean, he has hands, he's got vision, he finds the soft spots, and he's miscast. He's not a third-line player on this team.
Right.
I mean, and the coach makes remarks about, well, he has to be, play at both ends, this and that. And, yeah, that's all well and good, but, the other guys that don't score any goals should be playing at both ends. So I don't understand sometimes, and it gets back to Colleton, and I'm not really on him or criticizing. He's in a tough spot. He seems like a sharp guy. He's pretty candid. Like the other night, they were playing Vegas. Strome doesn't play the last 8-9 minutes of the game. He uses Kruger there. Now, okay, the chances of you making the playoffs are about the same as me winning Mr. Universe next year. Okay, it's not going to happen. All right, so why wouldn't you let a kid that hasn't even played a full season in the NHL, why wouldn't you put him in a position to learn at least in a tight game? Because I don't see 12 other forwards on the team better than Dylan Strome. So my point is, putting Kruger in there trying to win that game, trying to shut a team down, you're really not good enough to play that way. And that's the one problem I think I have when I watch them. They're not good enough to win 3-2 or 2-1.
No.
They're just not. If Corey Crawford was on top of his game with a .935 save percentage, they're not good enough to do that to get into the playoffs. But yet he seems to be leaning that way. But there's a bigger picture here that, and there's a bigger game plan that we're not privy to. And I don't know how much Colleton really has in his control. I think, they switched coaches. They had a guy who basically couldn't be told what to do because he had all the street cred and he had the rep. I mean, they go and trade for the best center in hockey, one of the top 3 face-off men in hockey, and get Antoine Vermette, and Quenneville plays him on wing. Doesn't take any face-off.
And healthy
he
scratch.
Did whatever he
Yeah.
Yeah. And he did whatever he wanted to do. Well, now they got a young kid that they could kind of say, hey, we want you to go in this direction or that direction. So I guess that's the one thing that bothers me. I mean, you have guys that are NHL players and could give you a lot, and he seems to be trying to make him into something that they're not because he's looking to win a game. And if I were a fan, or the way I look at it is, I'd like to see him finish, with 70 points, and take a shot and hope to get lucky and get one of those first 2 guys in the draft.
Yep. Yeah. Al, we're with you 100%.
Yeah, this is what we've been saying for months now. from the start of the season was like, I don't believe that this team is going to do anything better than they did last year. In fact, I think they're going to be much worse, and it's exactly what they've turned out to be. Minus a couple of hot streaks here or there, they could be dead last by a long shot if it wasn't for a couple like a hot streak over Christmas when everyone was thinking about the holidays. But that all came back down to earth again. So.
Yeah, we're going to see. I think we'll know a lot by the end of next month. The schedule for next month, it's not extremely difficult when you look at who they have on paper, but that's the dog days. If you go on a slide in February, they play Vancouver, they play Edmonton, they play Detroit, they play Ottawa. They've got some reprieves in here for sure, but if they step in it in February and go on a slide, there's no telling where that could take them. And God forbid one of the big something happens to Kane or Taves or even Duncan Keith at this point, or Strome, for example, a player that they don't really have anyone to go that really fills that kind of role, who knows what to do with the puck when he has it. You just don't know what could happen. I would just hope that they don't finish in the high 70s or 80 points or something like that, and really miss an opportunity to get someone who could be a real franchise-changing player in the draft.
Yeah, I can't even expand any more on that because that's the same stuff we've been saying as well. We completely agree on all points as far as that goes. So lately, the Blackhawks, they've been making moves. They've been shedding mistakes, but they've also been kind of bringing in these players. It's just this weird profile of player, like these former first-round draft picks, or like a Jaeckel. He was basically a highly rated, free agent coming out of college. What do you make of this? You just think it's the the contracts are expiring, so they'll come off the books anyway, kind of thing? Or do you think they're really going to try and reclaim these players and see if you can kickstart them?
Well, if you go back to when Talon was the GM, just before they got good, they did the same thing. They went and they took a chance on a few players here or there. Supposedly Stan Bowman liked Kajula. They tried to sign him originally out of college. They're probably looking at it. Gets back to my point that you don't have those role players in the farm. They don't have anyone that they could say, well, let's give this kid 20 games and bring him up. They don't have anyone down there, evidently. They don't bring anyone up. So, and it certainly isn't because they're overladen with talent or they're on an incredible run. So I think they're looking to kind of catch lightning in a bottle. Maybe they could turn someone. What I had heard, and it was pretty good intel, was and actually it did come out. Stan Bowman said it himself in an Athletic article, and I tweeted it that day. That kid was having a pretty good year before Hitchcock got there, and they got a lot of problems, obviously, in Edmonton. And from what I was told by someone that should know, there was nothing that kid could do that Hitchcock really liked. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of respect for Hitchcock as a coach, and he knows the game, and he'd be a hell of a guy, to be an analyst. I mean, he really could talk the game. But the fact of the matter is, I think he's like a lot of coaches, especially those that are set in their ways. If someone just is rubbing him the wrong way for whatever reason, he's on the wrong side of Hitchcock, and that's basically what it turned into. So, they took a shot and tried to acquire him, and that kind of stuff doesn't really bother me. What'll bother me is if they don't try to make a move at the trade deadline, or if they just sit on their hands more or less come free agency or before then to trade anyone, and just hope this is all going to magically get better, because this isn't like a one-off.
No,
the last few years haven't been good.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. This is, Al, it's great because you're confirming all the things that we've been saying.
Yeah, and we're just idiots, so we just got lucky on that one.
What's the pushback? I mean, I don't, I pay attention a little bit on Twitter, but between riding the horses and doing other things, I'm not engaged with it like you guys are. what's the pushback? That they're not that bad? They're going to get better?
They're not that bad. Prosperity is right around the corner. And, I think a lot of people are afraid of the unknown in a rebuild. It's funny. I won't tip the hand on it too much, but a lot of what we see in terms of people's personnel suggestions on social media is, hey, bring back and then insert ex-Hawks name here. It's a fear of the unknown out there, or a fear of Bowman making those bigger moves and really shaking up the roster. And then, people fall back on that. Well, it's just one or two moves, and we're right back in it. We're going to be an elite team again. And unfortunately, the statements of Bowman and McDonough don't help. When they let Quenneville go and hired Colleton, they made the statement, we think it's the coaching, not the players, that's the problem. And the subsequent performance has shown that perhaps no, it was not necessarily a coaching change that was going to really change the trajectory of the team, that there's some serious problems with the players. Now, I personally think Colleton got a bad hand dealt to him. And I do think he was hired in large part, or in part at least, because John McDonough and definitely likes to, he likes team players. He likes corporate players. He likes guys who are going to, play within his guardrails in terms of coaches and general managers. And you're right. Quenneville basically had the chops and the juice to do what he wanted to do. And so I think that's why Colleton's here. Now, does that mean Colleton's a bad coach? No, it doesn't mean that. But there seems to be this optimism and this almost longing for the past that a lot of fans have, that is just, it's not going to come back and it's not going to change. And the only way you're going to get back to that level of elite play is you're going to have to really turn over this roster to a large extent, maybe not completely. Maybe you can build around Taves and Kane. But a lot of people are unwilling to accept that. And the thinking is, well, trade Seabrook. Well, nobody's going to give you crap for Seabrook with his contract, or trade Anisimov, okay, but you might only get a third-round pick back. I mean, the problem is there's just not a lot of realistic willingness to bite the bullet and do a real rebuild.
Yeah, well, when McDonough said that it's a remodel and he thought it was a playoff team, it would have been a lot better for him to really not be there that day. But I know that's not something he's got to be front and center, because, I mean, he really showed, that his hockey knowledge is suspect. I mean, and let's face it, he saw what he saw firsthand in the last 10 years or so. That's a once in a lifetime.
Right.
3 cups in that short of a span.
Yeah.
Hall of Fame players on a team. I mean, now I'd like to see, I'd love to see 3 more cups in my lifetime from here on out. And even then, that would be something to see, from the standpoint that it's certainly not easy to come by. And it seems like, the teams that really went on a run and won multiple cups, they had one common thread. They were able to draft 2 Hall of Fame players.
Mm-hmm.
The Kings,
Malkin, Crosby, yeah.
Doughty, Kopitar.
Yeah.
And then there were players underneath. The Hawks had Seabrook and Keith there to start, and then you get Taves and Kane. So it's that's not easy to come by. Now, the thing about it is, if I'm looking at, and I hear some UFAs, well, yeah, there's some. Now, if I'm looking and I wanted to really take a swing and spend $10 or $11 million and get a player that's just starting his prime, I'd go take a swing at Mark Stone. Now, it's a shit show in Ottawa, and they're probably not going to keep both Duchesne and Stone. And from what people are saying, they're more pointed to keep Stone. But for the Hawks to do that, and that's a franchise, that's a centerpiece player. That's someone you could build around. He's a big guy. He does everything real well. Over a point a game player right now. but he's already at $7 million plus. So to get him, you're going to have to give $10 million, maybe a little bit more. Now, how are you going to be able to do that unless you were able to get rid of $4 or $5 or $6 or $7 million before that? So that's the part, and you can't just all of a sudden flip a switch and that money just disappears. You got to, it's like Anisimov. You got to hope you find someone desperate that needs that center, that thinks they're one player away, who wants someone that could play some defense, a bigger body, and you would just hope that they give you whatever so that you could get out of that $4 million. And Duncan Keith, I think you could get some value for Duncan Keith because he'll still play. He could still play 18 to 22 minutes a night for someone, even if he just played a little bit of special teams and even if he was a 3-4. So I think you could get something for him. But I'd be looking at the money that you could get out of now to take a swing at a UFA, and then hope that by some way, somehow, you could get one of those first two guys in the draft. And beside them, there's other players underneath that would be very good too. And I don't know enough about them all individually, just judging what they're saying about this draft. But those top two players could be generational players.
Right.
I mean, that kid, the Capo or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
I mean, he's playing with men, and
right.
he looked the part. I saw him on the World Juniors. Jack Hughes. He looks, the way he skates, he reminds me of Mike Modano.
Yeah.
But there seems to be some opportunity here because you're going to have to try to set yourself up for the next few years and hope, if you keep Taves and Kane, that their performance doesn't drop off the edge of the table. But you need multiple players here. You need a lot of help, and it'll be interesting to see how aggressive they'll be to take some stuff forward. Because if they're only going to wait for these young defensemen to come and think it's enough to change the club, it's not. It wasn't that long ago that Anaheim had a plethora of young defensemen. Other teams have had young defensemen. You need more than that, and the Hawks have multiple holes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Now, the last thing here that we haven't really talked about much, we kind of touched on it just a little bit, and before we get, finish up with Al here, the goaltending. Corey Crawford's out with the concussion. Who knows? He may never be back. And Colin Delia, we talked about him a little bit earlier. That's my boy, Colin Delia. He's been playing well, but he's coming back down to earth a little bit, which, of course, he's going to, because there was no way he was going to maintain where he was at. Cam Ward's doing okay. What do you think of the goaltending situation? I mean, I don't even see that, next summer, there's a whole lot of goalies that they could bring in. There's only the really high end and the really low end. There doesn't seem to be too much in the middle. So what do you think about that, Al?
Well, and then again, the high end, see, they're stuck there. I mean, they've been fortunate to always find in the last 10 years, whether it was Antti Niemi or whoever it was, they always seem to find a cheap goaltender as far as contract value who they could rely on. And now, Colin Delia. Now, Colin Delia's played, 10 NHL games?
Roughly,
so, yeah. So it's a very small sample. I would think, and I'm pretty sure of this, but, other people want him to play every game. I think they have to be very careful, and they really have to shelter him.
Yeah.
His save percentage is still very good, .932. I mean, but you look at the last 4 games, he's at about a 3.5 goals against in games he started. And I see a lot of good things. And I also see, he's gotten lucky multiple times where there have been in games where teams have hit, the post 2, 3, 4 times and things like that. And then that's not, talking down about his performance at all. He's done real well. He's been tossed in here. He's still a young kid, very young really for a goaltender. I would really watch, though. I would shelter this guy. I'd pick my spots with him. They're not just going to have Cam Ward sit there and have this kid play 80% of the games. I don't think so. I think that would be not a good recipe. As far as next year, they're stuck. I mean, they're stuck from the standpoint that Corey Crawford, you don't want him to retire. And that leaves you in a position where, if I were him, I think you got to make a commitment in this regard. You're susceptible and you've undergone some serious concussions. Mm-hmm. If it matters more to play hockey than what the future might hold because of the brain trauma that you've already gotten and that which you would be susceptible to, well then he's got to just wait till he's ready, because everyone is different. He may be ready in 2 weeks. He could be ready in 6 months or whatever. And then he comes back. But if you're going to come back, if I'm Corey Crawford, I'm not coming back if I'm quitting at the next concussion, because you're going to get another concussion.
Yeah.
So, you know what I'm saying? It's like you got to be. It's sad to say, but it's like you got to be in for a penny, in for a pound. So I don't know what he's going to do. But they have to have an answer there, and the retiring part doesn't work. So the long-term IR would work. And then they could go out and find another goaltender for $3 million or something again, and keep him with Delia, and hopefully maybe 2 years from now, Delia's really got his game together, and maybe even next year, and see how he is after he's played 50, 60 NHL games, and see what he looks like, and maybe they get lucky again.
Yeah, I can't argue with that either. That was actually, I was hoping when Crawford went down that, I understand why they brought him up. There's a waiver situation and all that. And I understand why they did bring him up. But I was kind of hoping they were going to keep him in Rockford and just kind of let him ride it out and be the man the entire season down there. And because this team wasn't going to be good anyway. And they've already seemed to have soured on Anton Forsberg. So I just was figuring, bring up Forsberg. You already fed him to the Wolves last year. I already ruined his head last year. Just let him come up, split time with Ward, and kind of shield Delia. And maybe you could bring up Delia for a couple games here or there just to see what you got in the NHL. But there's really it really didn't prove anything. Even if he goes out there with that save percentage, they give up 35 shots a game. I mean, the simple math just tells you they're going to get outscored most nights. So it was kind of a no-win situation for him. But if they wanted to bring him in and try him out, that's fine. But, I don't necessarily disagree with you about, sheltering them, let Ward, have more, or at least a healthy portion of the starts, because you don't need Ward next year. You might need Delia next year.
No, right. I mean, it's the goaltending position. It's very tough to determine. I mean, you look at a guy like Pascal Leclerc a few years ago. Mm-hmm. You go from winning the Vezina to being an afterthought 2 years later. Scott Darling.
Yeah.
He might be broken. He may be done. It's too bad if that's the case, but that happens. I mean, it's just goaltenders. It's just they're a different breed altogether. So, I mean, who knows? We'll see how this kid is. I like the fact, though, that he doesn't seem to blush. He seems to be he's in there. He's been kind of thrown to the wolves. He looks the part for the most part. Yeah, I mean, better rebound control. Yeah, I mean, most goaltenders, could have better rebound control. And when you're getting blasted with shots from every which way, that stands to reason. But maybe they get lucky again. They've been fortunate with goaltenders, and maybe they get lucky with him. The Corey Crawford thing's a sad situation, though. I don't know what direction he will go. I have no clue. And I think that really it might be in the best interest of the Blackhawks, not that they're pushing him one way or the other, not implying that at all. If he just sits out, maybe he misses all of next year. Who knows? Because, like I say, if you're going to subject yourself to the risks that could be coming down the road, it seems to me you almost have to make a commitment and say, hey, listen, this is what I want to do. This is what I love to do. I'll face the ramifications later. I'm going to be here. If I'm not going to come back, wait 6 months or sit out the rest of the year and come back next year and then catch a knee to the head and get another concussion. And then, you know what I'm saying? It would be better if he just somehow walked away.
Well, that's the thing. At this point, it's a choice between playing another maybe half a year, maybe a year, and being disabled, seriously disabled the rest of your life, and possibly taking years off your life. That's where he's at. And you're right. It almost makes no sense at this point for him to come back, because, I mean, he came back for what was it, 4 weeks? And, you know, he takes a shot to the head, and now he's out again, and he's back at, you know, in the concussion protocol. And, you know, concussions don't heal up. That's not how they work. And
it's not like a broken bone. It's not like, okay, now you're stronger.
Right.
It's
right.
You guys, I don't know if you listen to NHL radio much, but Matthew Barnaby, sometimes he's a trip and a half to listen to. But, you know, he says he doesn't know how many concussions he's had, but it's in the teens. But you know, he said in matter of fact, you know, sometimes it's 2 or 3 days, sometimes it's 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes it's 2 or 3 months.
Right.
You know, no one really knows. I mean, look at Brent Seabrook. What a you know, horse he is. He gets clobbered. It's like he caught a bad cold. He's back in 3 days.
Right.
Other guys, you know, that might have been 3 months.
Right.
You just don't know. It's just a shame. You know, it's just a shame that it worked out for him the way it has. And I wouldn't blame him no matter what he does. It's his decision. You know, as much as I think it's probably dumb to come back, if that's what he really wants to do and he's willing to face the risk, you know, God bless him. And if he wanted to walk away in the same regard, yeah, I would never question that. I mean, he's a young guy. He just had his first kid. A lot of years to live, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I feel exactly the same way. Plus, if you dial it back a little bit, he's only got 1 more year left on his contract after this year. So, like, he could sit out on LTIR next year, and then they'd be done with him. And that would be it. So it's not the end of the world, but, you know, at this point in time, we don't even know that he was necessarily the goalie or even close to the goalie he was before he got hurt, because he started off pretty well, but then he started tailing off really quickly again, and he wasn't playing any better than Cam Ward was, or at this point, you know, Colin Delia. So
it wasn't.
Yeah, I know. You know, at some point, I think you get beleaguered. You know, before you know it, you're losing by 2 or 3 goals, and when you're on a team, you know, there's a common thread. The bad teams can't score. And when you're on a team that can't score really, you know, you get down by a couple of goals, no matter how good you are in net, you know, the results are pretty much the same. And that's got to be very discouraging for a goaltender. So, I don't know, he looked a little beleaguered, and that's why I say, this kid, Delia seems to have a future. Way too early to say for sure, but I would just hope, you know, you don't get him abused, you know, because
Don't ruin
there's
him.
nothing worth playing for this year that would make any sense in that regard. There isn't. So, you know, you're right. Crawford's got 1 more year next year. You can't trade him. You can't do anything, really, unless someone wanted the money on their books for whatever reason, a la Marian Hossa. So, you know, you just play it out, and if he wants to come back and take another swing, he comes back and take another swing, and maybe you go with Delia and you find someone else that could be adequate and let this thing mature a little bit. But I mean, you want to give the players something to play for. You want to get into the playoffs, because you can't get that kind of experience from a book. You know, you need to be able to try to get there as soon as possible, because the other factor is you don't want Kane and Taves to age away on you and not be able to take a little bit of a run with them again. So I mean, they're not in an easy spot, but I just think that as it turned out this year, they've got an opportunity. And I'm not saying that you go and tank the rest of the year and you lose on purpose, but if they make a trade or two that would weaken them, it puts them in a position to finish finish in the bottom 3 teams, and you got to swing at a big time player. And if I were a fan, that would be what I would hope for, because then at least you'd have some fun watching them.
Yeah.
As it is now, it's tough to watch. And my wife goes, and I don't know what it is. I guess I saw the whole ride, and now I want to see exactly how this bottoms out or what's going to happen. So I keep watching. I watch every minute.
Yep.
But I'm in the minority. My wife goes, "What are you doing? They're losing again." I says, "Yeah, I know." And I keep watching. But, you just wonder like when the sellout streak, although that could be kind of manipulated, when that's going to go too, and that becomes a problem for them also. I guess the Kings, their sellout streak ended this year. So a lot of stuff in the wind here. To be interesting to see how it sorts itself out.
That's great. Yeah. Well, Al, we both want to thank you so much for coming on the show. We'd like to do it a little more often. We really like what you have to say, and you bring a good insight. And so again, it's Al Cimaglia on Twitter. It's easy enough to follow. We're going to retweet all the stuff and tag you in all the things so you're aware of it all. But thanks again, Al, for coming on with us, and we'll have you on again.
Oh, I appreciate it, and you guys take care.
Thanks, Al.
Remember, always have thick skin when you give. Always have thick skin when you're going to give your own opinion.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
You guys take care.
Thanks a
lot. Right, Al. Thanks, bud.
Wow, great. That was great. Al's awesome to listen to on the radio, and he was even better when we gave him a little bit more time to talk. We talked about a lot of good things, and I don't like patting ourselves on the back too much, but I think we all agree and have been saying kind of the same things for a while, right, John?
Yeah, it's really. I mean, I've always respected his points of view, and he's a smart guy, and he understands that hockey's a business, but he also understands hockey, and so it was really great to hear that, and to know that there's at least someone out there who sees things the way we're seeing it this year, and I know there's more than just Al, but certainly his credibility is really valuable.
Yeah, for sure. I really enjoy having him on. He's really easy to talk to, and he's got a lot of great insight. So that's I always like listening to him when him and Block would get on together and do the Third Man In podcast. I always loved listening to that because I could listen to Al and Chris. Those are
yep.
I know I fanboy out about both of them, but I could listen to them talk forever because they're intelligent people. They've got great insight, and it makes sense. So. Yeah. So, shifting gears a little bit, we do have AA Ron. Hi, Aaron.
What's up, boys?
There he is, AA Ron.
I can't go on without playing your clips, right?
Where is AA Ron right now?
But we're not going to come down on you hard. We're not going to get your blood pressure up just yet. We're going to have a little bit of fun. John put out a tweet this week, or yesterday. Not this week. It's more of yesterday. Basically said, you might be a meatball if, and that's just finished this sentence, the best will be read on air. Do you have some selected?
I do. So there were many good responses, and this is going to become, I think, a weekly feature, if not a almost weekly feature.
I like it.
It's just too much fun, and it gets people, it gets the listeners involved, and the responses are just, some of them are priceless. They're all good, but some of them are really good. So I'm going to do about 3 or 4 of them here. So this one comes from at Skybone404. You might be a meatball if you want to bring back Scott Darling and have him hit somebody with Cody Parkey.
I got to get a
little note at the end. Hey, makes about as much sense as most meatball hot takes. Yes, indeed. Our buddies Talking Hawks from out Aaron's way in the Rockies.
John
you might
Jaeckel.
be a meatball if you bought a Chevy because, hey, it's what Kane and Taves drive. There's another one here that I got to do. This one's just for Gate. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can find it here. There it is. This one comes from Hostile Derek Harms.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You might be a meatball if your name is fucking hostile.
Words are bullshit.
They're just useless sounds that we make with our stupid mouths.
But the big winner tonight on this one comes from our buddy Frank Nova, also known as Ad Hockey Night.
Future Rinkcast guest. We will have him
definitely. We got to have him on.
He's been on the Shoutcast. He's awesome. Go ahead.
Absolutely. You might be a meatball if every personnel change you suggest contains the phrase "bring back X-Hawk, insert name here."
Nailed it!
Actually, Fork he nailed a couple of them. He nailed something something else on the Facebook page. Just I think it was today. I think it was actually on Aaron's article that he nailed something. I got to go back and find it, but he's been on fire lately.
He has.
I love Frank too. He's awesome. I mean, that's
he's one of the funniest dudes in the Hawk blogosphere, if not the funniest.
He's one of the nicest guys too.
Yeah, he's great.
Frank and CT are two of the nicest guys. They really
cool too.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you could dress them down, all you wanted, and they just come back and like kill you with kindness. They're nice. They're really nice people. I really like them both. So yeah, we bash things a lot. We get blamed for being negative, but I want to give some positive out there. The people that we like and we respect, like Block and Cimaglia and Forklift and CT and Scotty Powers.
There are others.
Yeah,
there are others.
Oh, and I don't think I mentioned it last week. Did I mention? I don't know if I did or not, but I'm going to mention it again. But I want to thank Scott Powers for giving me a shout out in his last. One of his articles at the Athletic. Gave me a shout out because I did design their logo for their new podcast. Even though hey, I had my boy Laz. I don't necessarily always agree with Laz, right?
Man,
no, you don't.
Freaking delusional.
No, you don't.
So I was wrong on that one.
But I got to be, I had to be nice to him. I saw an opportunity. I had an idea I had heard them talking about they needed a logo for their name. I had an idea. I just put it together, threw it to him and said, hey, if you want this, because I'm not as bad as I'm portrayed to be on the internet. So, but anyway, you got any more of those?
No, so we'll go with those for tonight and
okay.
Start thinking about what the next Twitter question of the week is going to be.
Yeah. Well, we kind of talked about Delia a little bit with Al Cimaglia, but he was mentioned in 31 Thoughts today. Elliot Friedman's 31 Thoughts about how his path to the NHL. I mean, of course, it's a short quip, but for being what it is, 31 Thoughts is one of the most read articles that comes out weekly. So, that was pretty cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the Gus controversy with Al Cimaglia. We did see this week Slater Cuckoo.
My son died.
Made his Blackhawks debut. He actually stuck with the team. They sent Brandon Davidson down. So Cuckoo played last game, and he actually took over the ice time that Eric Gustafsson didn't get in the third period. Eric Gustafsson was benched for the entire third period, while Slater Cuckoo got 7 minutes of ice time just in the third period alone.
Can I, not to open the whole Gustafsson chestnut again, but, I thought that Colleton's comments about benching Gustafsson in the third period, they're very illustrative. They're very illuminating if you really dissect them and think it through. Colleton is the guy who said, Gustafsson has the opportunity to be a really special defenseman. It's up to him. And he's now sat him a couple of times. He's been a healthy scratch a couple of times. So this is Colleton trying to send him a message. I'm saying this for the people who keep coming back with, well, Gus just needs some coaching. He needs to be coached up.
At 27, yeah.
I don't think that's what it is. I think what it is he knows Gustafsson's been around. Gustafsson has been coached. He was coached over in Sweden, which per capita produces the most NHL defensemen of any country on the planet. He's been coached by Joel Quenneville, who's an NHL defenseman, and he was coached by Ulf Samuelsson, who was an NHL defenseman, and he was coached by Mike Kitchen, who I believe played defense in the NHL. I mean, he's been coached and coached and coached. I think it's at some point it's no longer coaching. It's how much do you want to work in your end and in the zones other than the offensive zone to be a complete defenseman? How much do you want it? And, I don't think desire is a difficult thing to coach. I think what Colleton is doing is he's trying to send a message and get through the guy's head that, his ice time is going to be reduced, and maybe he'll play his way out of Chicago if he doesn't start taking it seriously and putting that effort in all three zones. I don't think that there's some magic protocol they're going to put him through that's going to suddenly make him a complete two-way defenseman. I think it's all about him. And the bottom line is that he is 26, 27 years old. He does have a golden opportunity. They're giving him every opportunity. But let's stop with this. We got to give him 2 more years of coaching. That's ridiculous.
No.
It's not what it is at this point.
So you got to coach a guy till he's 30 now? That's what that's what they're going to tell us?
Never been coached to this point, apparently, going by that logic. So that's all I have to say on Gustafsson this week. But guys, let's start to look at this realistically and understand, for all of his offensive ability, he's a detriment defensively, and it can be argued that it at least negates what he does offensively if it doesn't outweigh it.
Well, yeah. 2 points on that. The first one, I was going to bring up this comparison on Twitter, but I knew it got blown way out of proportion. But look at what's going on with Brandon Perry, right? Guy who's been up and down in the NHL, questionable, blah, 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 but he always scored goals. Like, that's not something that you can't always just get goals in the NHL. Like, there's a certain brand of player that scores goals, and he scored a lot of goals in the NHL, but he could never get a solid job in the NHL. He's always in the AHL. He's always bum slaying in the AHL, leading the AHL in scoring, doing all this stuff. Why isn't any team taking a real chance on him? Like, they'd bring him up in an emergency situation, but they were never bringing him up like in camp and like really giving him an honest chance. There's something behind that, and I kind of liken that to kind of what the Gustafsson thing was. Like, he's had chances. He played a lot of games in the NHL, like that first year they signed him out of Sweden, and then he kind of disappeared. And just got buried in Rockford, and he was playing behind Clendenning and whoever last year, and Franzen last year and stuff. And it's like, when you get to be 27, 28 years old, like, maybe you just are what you are, like with Brandon Perry. Like, even though he's scoring like it's an insane pace with Vegas, they keep sending him down, and they're playing these games with the bringing him up and sending him down and bringing him up and sending him down in an emergency situation. Like, if he's a guy who's really a solid NHL goal scorer, or at least semi all around player, like, you're going to keep him in the NHL because he can score goals, and you can't just tell a guy go score goals. Like, that's a natural ability.
Right.
So it's kind of the same thing with, but I would have had to get into it on Twitter, which Aaron so well knows today. That getting into it on Twitter, you get a lot of people who misread things and misunderstand things, or don't read, whatever the case. So that's what I didn't want to get into with that part of it. But I don't know. Oh, and the other thing is his goals. He's got 7 goals, 8 goals. 5 of them are on the power play. He's getting fed by, Patrick Kane and Alex DeBrincat and Jonathan Toews being out there. Like, this is stuff that, like, if Duncan Keith could get his head out of his ass on the power play, he could have probably pulled this off too. He just doesn't. Right. He's like stuck in some old pattern, and he's 35 years old, and that's what he's going to be. But, there's some pretty good players that are feeding him these power play goals. You take those power play goals away, and he's down to like 2 or 3, and he's back to just a normal, 4, 5, 6 defenseman like Al talked about earlier. And I think someone's got to score. Even on a bad team, someone's got to score. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily a great player, because you put them on a great team where there's better players around them, they may not have the same kind of production. And that's kind of what you kind of had that with Scott Darling a little bit. Now we're hitting this with Erik Gustafsson. You got to peel back the layers, and there's a facade and a mask on this guy that they're trying to sell you something that's not really there. They dress it up. They put a little. They're basically putting makeup on a pig. So that's my whole thing about the Gustafsson thing. I don't care. I mean, like, if they were to keep him around at a reasonable rate and he played third pair and they just used him on the power play, great. And we've said that. That's fine. But to say that he's a top pairing defenseman, he's not. And we'll go back to Laz.
Man, this guy's freaking delusional.
I mean, he said that he's a top 3 defenseman, legit top 3 defenseman. Like, have you watched this guy play defense? He literally, I looked this up on an advanced stats site. He literally gives up more high danger chances in close, by the crease, than any defenseman in the NHL.
Well, I'm going to try to find a very telling statistic here. I'm doing a little poking around right now.
And you can like or not like advanced stats. I don't care. It tells where the shots are coming from. The shots are coming from in close. He's giving up a lot of shots in close, which in turn is going to give up a lot of goals. And on top of it, I pointed out the one game he played the Flamingo and screened Calandelia, but on top of that, he was in the wrong position in the first place. And we had the apologists out there. Dylan Strome shouldn't have chased the guy in the corner. Well, if Erik Gustafsson didn't turn that puck over in the first place, the rest of the team would have been scrambling, which is what ended up happening. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to get negative. I don't like being negative.
It's funny, and I'll just throw this out because this is another really silly thing that's been out there. People saying about Gustafsson. The people have been making that he's an Erik Karlsson type of defenseman.
Oh my God! I'm glad no one said that to me. I would flip my lid.
Well, and here, so just for the sake of a reality check here, Corsi 4, Erik Karlsson 59.8%, Erik Gustafsson 50.9. Okay, so you can make the argument. Well, Gustafsson is at least isn't underwater in Corsi. Great, but. Because clearly he's a really good offensive player and he contributes a lot offensively and he's on the power play a lot. But the bottom line is there is just what we said before that, his defense is so bad, it kind of evens it out. But he's not in the same league as Erik Karlsson. So let's just put that to bed. It's not even close.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's almost the same age.
Yeah, they're like a year apart or two, a year and a half apart. Because isn't Karlsson like 29, 30?
No, Erik Karlsson's 28, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, Aaron, you want to add anything in on this Gustafsson thing before we move on to the big news at hand?
Yeah, the Gustafsson thing for me is really tough. It's like for every amazing, nice power play goal that he gets, he's just caught. Getting flat-footed, just getting burned, brutally burned, in all different ways, getting inside, outside. And it's just like, I don't think this guy even knows how to block a shot. I mean, he's using his skate, like he's putting one foot in, one foot out.
That's willingness and desire, blocking shots is not that hard.
I mean, I don't really get it. I guess the last time we've had somebody like him that was just very purely offensive minded and skating was like maybe Nick Leddy, but I don't remember Nick Leddy being this bad on defense.
He wasn't.
But yeah, I think on a lot of other teams, they would have already seen enough from Gustafsson. I mean, the guy's job is to play defense, and he's really bad at that.
Yeah. Well, and then you get the goofballs that are like, well, just put him at wing. Like it's that easy. There's like 2 players that have been able to do that really successfully, and that was Dustin Byfuglien and Brent Burns. But those guys are freaks.
Yeah.
Those guys are big, and they're big too. They're freaks. Like you can't just throw a guy at wing. This is not a video game where you just throw guys all over the ice. It's a big deal, and I brought this up somewhere the other day. It's a big deal when guy plays his offside. Well, much less a completely different position.
You play Gustafsson at wing, and he's going to get manhandled and neutralized by the bigger, better defenseman, because it's going to be the same thing, and it's going to be his willingness to compete physically. So he's a talented player. I mean, he probably, intellectually and skills wise could probably be relatively effective as a wing. But again, he's gonna break your heart, because I think the issue is, it's not coaching. It's how much he wants to excel in certain situations and in certain aspects of the game, and he hasn't shown that willingness yet. It's not coaching at this point. If he was 20, I would say yeah, but he's 26.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's move on.
Yeah. All right. So this is the big thing of the day.
There he is. Aaron.
So I'm going to give a little bit of a background on this. So last night in a private chat, which we often throw things around, trade scenarios, ideas. Hey, this might work. Maybe the Hawks could, it's that whole kind of thing. It's just speculation, nothing behind it. But Aaron comes up with a trade scenario, possibly for Patrick Kane, something you have for Patrick Kane. Now, really, the Blackhawks should be open for business at this point in time. We'll kind of get into this a little bit more, but we're not saying that yet. We want Patrick Kane out the door tomorrow. Just a possibility. If someone was to throw an offer at Stan Bowman, maybe what would be something reasonable based on what your familiarity. I'm gonna trip over that word. Familiarity with the players. So, and Aaron, you're very familiar with the Avalanche because you lived there. So you're familiar with other teams too, but you are familiar with the Avalanche. So you threw together this trade scenario, and it was with the Avalanche. And basically what it would do is it would help them, or at least your intention was it would help them. It would help the Blackhawks. So what was your proposal?
So I'm going to preface this conversation with, I did not think that I would get as much backlash on this as I did from both sides. My phone was just blowing up all day, and I'm happy that we kind of stirred up the conversation, and we just learned that both of these fan bases are very passionate about their players and their prospects, and it's not just about a player that's on paper. It's not just about it's not just business to them. It's the team that they've invested in for a long time, and there's a lot of history there between both teams. So I understand why people were passionate about it, and a lot of people came after me. I didn't take it personally, but I was welcoming of the feedback. So thanks to everybody who read it, even though they might have thought that I was absurd for even proposing it. But I essentially proposed a deal for Patrick Kane that would send him, Eric Gustafsson, and a draft pick to the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for the Ottawa lottery pick, if it is a lottery pick. So if Ottawa finishes, still at the bottom of the league, and they get the number 1 overall pick in this year's draft, or the number 2 pick, plus the 2017 number 4 overall pick, which is Cale Makar, who's currently at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, very talented young defenseman, as well as Tyson Barrie. And Tyson Barrie was really just a defenseman who a lot of the Avs fans like, because he provides a lot of offense like Gustafsson, but he's also had a lot of trouble defensively. And the reason why I picked him is because he's a large cap hit for the next 2 years, or I think this year and next year. He's got about $5.5 million on his cap hit, and Eric Johnson makes $6 million, but I really think that they like him a little bit more than Barrie. He wears a A on his sweater, and I think he's just more of a leader for that defensive group. But yeah, so my intentions were that, bottom line for the Blackhawks, where are the Hawks going right now? They have a player that's going to be a Hart Trophy candidate in Patrick Kane, that's going to score, some projected somewhere around 100 points this year, and he's dominating the league right now. He's a top player on one of the worst teams in the league, and it's like, Are we wasting this guy's potential? Can we sell high on Patrick Kane, knowing that this is a long-term move? This isn't like, okay, we can just have Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, Duncan Keith, and build around them, because that's been the plan that John McDonough and Stan Bowman have put forth. And they've been feeding everyone with, oh, well, it's just going to take a couple years to rebuild. And it just seems like that plan continues to go south every single year. So at what point do we say maybe these are the wrong people in the front office to turn this team around, and maybe this is the wrong plan, and we say, you know what, let's cut our losses, let's get some high-end prospects. We're talking Jack Hughes, Cale Makar, and then in 2 years we might be back in competing. And I think I mentioned in the article, a lot of people in Chicago would be okay with that. We've seen other teams do it, and we've seen this team do it. So on the Avalanche side, they are essentially, they're like a bubble team. You know, they have really good young talent. Their books look great. Joe Sakic's been really patient about building through the draft and getting really high-end talent. And with this Ottawa pick and their pick this year in the first round, I mean, they're doing it the right way. And I think that them losing out in the first round, what's going to push them through? And I think it's going to be a superstar type player. And if they have the ability to add somebody like Patrick Kane to their lineup with, just swapping out Eric Gustafsson for Tyson Barrie and not having to give up anybody like Gabe Landeskog or Mikko Rantanen, you're adding a top 5 player to your team. I think you instantly become a contender in the Central Division and in the Western Conference, and you have Patrick Kane for another 4 years. You're going to add a lot of wins. You're going to go deeper in the playoffs, and you're going to compete for a Stanley Cup without really taking anything away from your core. So those are my intentions with this article, and you guys can kind of just discuss what came out of this article, because it was a lot more than just that.
Well, one thing that I found, and we're kind of in a slight bubble here with the Blackhawks. We deal with the Blackhawks fan base. We sent every once in a while we see little things blow up outside of the in the rest of the NHL. But we just see a lot of what happens with the Blackhawks, and we they're delusional. They're stuck with the past. They think that every prospect is the next Bobby Orr or the next Wayne Gretzky and this and that. On. What we found out was that maybe that's not just the Chicago fan base. That the Colorado's fan base is the same way, in the fact that they're in love with their young potential in the future kind of thing. But what they don't know, and I'm sure that a lot of them, are younger fans and things like that, and don't remember when the Avalanche won cups, because it was a long time ago. But what we know here in Chicago is, like, you have a window, and you have to maximize that window. And if you have a window where Landeskog and McKinnon and Rantanen and like all these players are starting to gel, like the Blackhawks in 2009. Yeah, you have to maximize that window by putting it over the edge. And John, you mentioned this on Twitter with the Marian Hossa thing. While Brian Campbell helped the Blackhawks, that Marian Hossa thing put them over the edge. And Patrick Kane might be, at this point in his career, better than Marian Hossa was at that point in his career.
Yeah, I mean, they're completely different types of players. They both play right wing, but in terms of the style, the profile, just different types of players. I mean, Hossa was that power forward, two-way, great defensive forward, more of a scorer, a little less of a setup guy, where Kane is maybe a bit more of a setup guy and still a great scorer. But, Hossa just had that off the charts leadership, and presence in the dressing room and credibility that he brought in and work ethic, all those things. And he was the right guy at the right time. And absolutely, he was, I'm not saying they wouldn't have won the cup without him, but he played a big part in winning that first cup and then the other two as well. And So I mean, for somebody to come out and say, well, adding a Patrick Kane doesn't make any sense for this team. He's aging. He is at the top of his game. And if you think, whether you're the Colorado Avalanche or you're the Toronto Maple Leafs or even the Buffalo Sabres, if you think that, adding a elite scoring right wing, super creative, who could makes the other players around him better, could get you to the Stanley Cup Finals, then that's a move you got to think about if you've got the cap space and the ability to take on the salary for the next few years. I'm not saying that they should do it or that the Hawks should trade Kane, but this whole idea that Kane is untradeable, he's a great player. There's no question about it. But by the time this team is contending again, I'm gonna throw this out there. He's gonna be 33 years old. Because you know what? This team is not going to be appreciably better next year. This fantasy that's being pushed of all these defensemen who are currently playing in junior or in college are going to come in and change the defense next year. None of whom supposedly are very good defensively. They're all that offensive style defensemen. It's just it's crazy. It's lunacy. It's not going to happen. And Al said it as well.
Well, yeah, so, and sure, Boquist could be very good. Ian Mitchell could be very good, and Bowden could be very good. But they're not going to come in the rookie year, coming right out of junior or college, and make this team that much better. They're going to make their mistakes. They're going to have to learn.
And some of these guys may not make the team next year. Some of these guys may be in Rockford.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing for anybody. It could be the best thing for their development because pro hockey is a significant jump from junior. And I know. What about Yoki Harju? Hey, absolutely. But you know what? There are also guys who really struggle to make that transition as well. And defense is the hardest position to learn at the pro level. The hardest. That transition is harder for defensemen than any other position. So, again, by the time this team is competitive again, assuming some things go right, Patrick Kane's going to be 32, 33 years old. So Aaron's point of view and the premise of his article is actually from a business standpoint. And I don't mean Rocky selling tickets this year like everybody, all these people complaining about that are in Rocky's will. You're not. The bottom line is in terms of rebuilding this team to the point where they can compete second, third round in the playoffs, go to the Stanley Cup Finals, win a Stanley Cup. You've got to make some big moves, and one of those big moves may be moving a significant piece and getting a lot of really quality futures in return. Because there's still a lot of holes in this team, even if all those young defensemen mature, because they all play a similar style of game, and there are other needs on this team and in this organization.
Yeah, well, and two, Aaron's kind of, your idea was, try to get as high, high up in the draft, try to get Jack Hughes or something like that, Kako, or something like that. That's a player that's going to have to, they're going to have to learn too. They may show up in the NHL the rookie year. That doesn't mean that they're going to, translate right away. Kako's a little bit bigger. Jack Hughes is a smaller, Patrick Kane type player. If he could play like a Patrick Kane, sure, that's all good and well. But there's no slam dunk that these guys step in and do anything. You have a proven commodity in Patrick Kane. Probably, I shouldn't even have to say probably, the best U.S.-born NHL player ever. And he's 30 years old. Maybe they think that he's 35 because he seems like he's been in the league forever, because he has been since he was 18. But he's really only 30 years old. He's hitting his stride. He's playing at an MVP pace, dragging a bunch of turds on his back. And he just, day in, day out, he performs, and he scores, and he's, a rink rat, and he stays in good shape. And whatever you think of his personality, and I don't like his personality or anything off the rink, I don't glorify it, but on the rink, you cannot deny what he is on that rink. And to say that a team doesn't need him is just pure lunacy. Like, any team needs a Patrick Kane on their team. You may have some other good players on there, but a Patrick Kane is certainly not going to hinder your team any. So to think that, McKinnon's young, Landeskog is, in his getting in his later 20s now. Eric Johnson's 30. Their defense is a little bit on at least the top end is a little bit on the older side. But you have Mikko Rantanen, who's 22. Like, there's only going to be a window for so long. That window does not stay open forever. To think that what happened with the Blackhawks can happen with every team because they were able to spread out their cups over, a 6-year period or whatever it was. And the Kings did 2, the Pittsburgh did a couple, but that's not the regular thing. I mean, that's not going to happen. You basically had 3 teams dominating the NHL for a decade. And to assume that that's going to happen with this core in Colorado, you can't just assume that. Like, they're assuming a lot of things in Toronto. In Toronto, it's not really going the way they're hoping. There's still a lot of things up in the air. They're getting to that window where, and we talked about this with Al a little bit. We're getting to that window where it's like, can you afford Marner? Can you afford Matthews? Can you afford like all these guys? And they're going to have to start dumping talent because they had to sign these kids and skip bridge deals and all that stuff. This is what's going to happen in Colorado in the near future. I mean, you've got McKinnon pretty much dialed in at one of the better deals in the NHL, but that doesn't mean that, Landeskog or, when Rantanen comes around, he's going to command some serious money. They're going to be right behind Toronto if at the rate they're going. So if you could bring, Patrick Kane in right now and maximize it and put yourself over the edge, make yourself a favorite in the Western Conference when the kind of Western Conference is up for grabs, do it. What everyone seems to think is we're attacking each side, or Aaron was attacking each side, like attacking Patrick Kane that he's not good and he needs to be traded and he's awful. And then the Avalanche people are like, well, you just want to give us your old garbage because he's no good anymore. Like, no, he's actually the best player on the team by a long shot. But he's only getting signed for 4 more years, and maybe 3 of those, they're not going to be any good. Maybe in the last year of his contract, they might be good. So what are you doing? Why not maximize that when you can get the most for him? A comment that I heard from Brian Burke, and everyone wants to hate on Brian Burke but the comment I heard was, you should want to trade a guy a year too early rather than a year too late.
Yep.
Just remember that.
Agreed.
Because all these guys, and now you're with Brent Seabrook. You're stuck with this. This is what's going to happen if Patrick Kane falls off the table in a year or two. You're going to be stuck with that $10 million, and no one's going to want to take it. And then you're going to have to eat it for 2 more years. Like, maybe now is the time when they're not going to compete. And there's a pretty good chance they're not going to compete for a cup in the next 4 years. Get something for them. You could get a lot for them. And the same with. And this would help out Colorado. So that's it. Like you said, it would help both teams. Why is everyone so upset about just some speculation on something that could possibly work on for both ways? I don't get that. But
yeah, can we talk about more an extreme example of a team that didn't sell high on some of their successful players, like the Red Wings? And
sure,
I think John would have a really good perspective on this. Guys like Pavel Datsyuk, Zetterberg, the Detroit Red Wings were a dynasty, and they won.
The Red Wings followed, Aaron. That's a great reference. The Red Wings followed the model that the Hawks are trying to follow, which is sort of a soft rebuild around, aging veterans who were part of the glory years, and it didn't work. They accumulated a few talented players like Dan DeKeyser, Gustav Nyquist, but they just didn't have the inertia anymore to really be a playoff team even anymore. And that's exactly what's happening with the Hawks. And a lot of fans can't see that. A lot of fans think this team is better than what it really is. And it's really hard to get people to see it.
Well, and we also saw this. Taves and Kane are guys you build around. Not anymore. They're not. They're really not. You need to start bringing in this new next wave, this new core. We keep saying like the next generational player. Maybe it's Capo Caco, maybe it's Jack Hughes. You need to start building around that. And and then moving on from all these things that, these lingering contracts, the guys are getting older. You don't build around this is not, you don't build around 30-year-old players. You don't. The 30-year-old players become, that push that pushes you over the edge, but you don't build a team around a guy who's 30. You don't. And that's just not wise. So, no one wants to have to see, Patrick Kane go somewhere else. Now, my whole thing with this is this is never going to happen because McDonough and Bowman aren't going to want to face Patrick Kane 6 times a year and get their brains beat in for the next 4 years by Patrick Kane. That's a legitimate, thing. They're not going to want to see him, I think that if Patrick Kane was, if they were to investigate that, and it would have to be the absolute right deal for him, that they do it to the Eastern Conference. And you could speculate about Buffalo, and I'm not just saying that because Buffalo's over there, but somewhere in the Eastern Conference where they don't have to see Patrick Kane 6 times a year. That's what I would think. But to think that it's impossible that Patrick Kane could be not with this team next year, to me, I don't see that as, an impossibility at all.
Gate, I thought about Buffalo, and I had a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about the Sabres, and they're not terrible this year. They do have 3 first-round picks this draft, but those picks, except for the St. Louis pick, which is protected, are not going to be high first-round picks. And the only reason why I picked the Avalanche for this scenario is because they have, the firepower in their prospect pool and in their draft picks to crack the door open on, wow, that's something that we might have to consider. And that's the number 1 overall pick or the number 2 overall pick. It's just there aren't that many teams in the Eastern Conference that are bad or have high draft picks and prospects that could deal for Kane. Because the only way that you really even start to listen on a trade for Patrick Kane is if you get elite blue chip prospects or picks. And I think the Avs have that, and I think they're close to being a contender, and I think it's kind of a match. And I know a lot of people got upset on the Avalanche side, and we even heard somebody wouldn't even trade Cale Makar for Patrick Kane, which is...
Well, yeah, that's insanity. I mean, he could be, and that would be like the equivalent, or at least close in Blackhawks land, of saying trade Adam Boqvist for someone of Patrick Kane's ilk, kind of thing, is a comparison. He may be better. I thought that,
most of the stuff from the Avs side was, we've been building through the draft for this long, but it's like, for the last 4 or 5 years, I remember, I think the Avs won the conference, I think 4 years ago, before they got really bad, and they were on the rise. And then they've kind of just been slowly coasting, and they've been rebuilding for 4 years, 5 years. At what point do you say, we need to go for it, we need to stop building? And I think the Hawks did that with Hossa, like you guys talked about. But just hanging on to those prospects and those picks, trading away the number 1 overall pick and Cale Makar, that's a tall price. I mean, that's a lot of value right there, but think of the value you get in return. And I just think that both parties were just holding, their assets so close to their chest in this article that it just blew up. And I don't know. I think on the Avalanche side, it really helps them, and it really helps their market. And I know trading Patrick Kane in the division isn't ideal, but if you can come up with a team that can give the Blackhawks that jump start on their farm system and their prospect pool, I mean, wow, if you have, let's think of this scenario. If you trade Patrick Kane and you get that deal, you have the number 1 overall pick. Let's say you add Jack Hughes and you add Cale Makar to your prospect pool. So you have that. You have the Blackhawks pick this year, right? You have anything else that you would trade at this deadline. If you trade Patrick Kane, you might as well trade anybody else. Everybody's for sale at that point. You can get a first-round pick for Duncan Keith. You can trade Brandon Saad for some prospects and picks. Who knows what Jonathan Toews can receive back, because he still has a lot of value to him. If anyone needs a leader with 3 Stanley Cups. You know, it's a lot of money, but you can work around that. I mean, can you imagine if they sold off this core? You know, obviously it wouldn't be favorable in Chicago, but what kind of haul that would bring in this year and next year? You're looking at what the Vegas Golden Knights had, but probably better, because you're going to have much more value. And I don't know. What do you guys think about that? About what haul they could get if they just decided to flush it?
Oh, they could flush it. I don't think they would completely flush it. I mean, someone's gonna hang around. Like Kane or Taves would hang around. You know, Keith could go. We talked about this with Al. He said the same thing we said. That Keith has value. He has a reasonable contract, and he could probably eat some serious minutes for a playoff team. Seabrook, you're not going to see him go unless there's a compliance buyout. So you're already really paring it down, because I don't see them sending away both of the, you know, quote unquote faces of the franchise with Kane and Taves. One of them would hang. Whichever one it is whichever one it is. You know, you could say, well, trade Taves to Winnipeg because he sucks, or, you know, whatever. It's really 6 of one, half a dozen of another, really, at that point, because neither one of those teams, you know, neither one of those guys are going to be. You're not going to see the Stanley Cup. Like, their contracts are going to be up. Do the Meatballs all expect that, you know, they're going to sign some $1 million deal to play in perpetuity for the Blackhawks because hometown, quote unquote, hometown discount? I mean, this is insanity that you would not get. I mean, if you were playing this in a video game and you had no emotional ties to these guys, you'd be like, God, we got to get rid of these salaries. I can't get any new players. Like, it makes sense. Why does making sense hurt people so much? I don't get this. It's just so strange to me that, and then everyone claims that they're an expert. Now, of course, yeah. Oh, you could say we claim we're experts, but I guarantee you we watch and pay attention to a lot more what's going on this team than the average fan does, who just looks at their Twitter feed every once in a while and, maybe watches a game here or there. Like, we're trying to dig deeper. We're putting in a lot of work for this stuff. So we know a couple of things, and we've seen a couple of things. So it's like, maybe you just want to be like, oh, really? I never even thought of it that way. Or, oh, okay, I could get that. But, I didn't necessarily agree with that, where the destination was, but I said, I get the sentiment makes sense. And this is why I don't, I think it should be an Eastern, or I think it would be an Eastern Conference or whatever. But that, doesn't take away from the whole theme of the article. That, for the right deal, the Blackhawks might want to maximize, the potential return by investigating it. And that was it. That was basically it. So, but as it is, as goes in this social media world, people don't read articles. People just read the headlines and then get outraged. And I've been guilty of it. So, I will admit I've definitely been guilty of it before. And then I go read the article and it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, you screwed around with my head on that. That was a clickbait. And we've seen a lot of that too. Oh, it's just clickbait. It's just, oh, jeez.
Yeah, the thing that kind of got me today was the title of the article was, could the Colorado Avalanche trade for Patrick Kane? And that set people off thinking that I was, saying this needs to be the deal. These two teams, I don't know. I think a lot of Avs fans thought that we were dumping Patrick Kane on them. But yeah, I mean, I don't think this could happen. I mean, it could, but I don't think it will happen just because of the nature of the general managers. Sakic's been really conservative, and I don't think with Bowman's track record and his plan that this would kind of fit the move. I think if anything, if the Blackhawks wiped the front office and there was a different general manager in there, I think then you might be talking. But yeah, I mean, the whole idea was, let's look at this thing, be smart about it, and say, hey, what is our direction? Are we close to winning the Stanley Cup? If we're not close, how can we maximize value? And some fans on Twitter did agree, and they say, hey, you know what? Maybe this is something we should think about. it would be nice to have a top prospect like number 1 pick, and another young defenseman that's different. And we didn't talk about that. Cale Makar is offensively talented, but he's 6 foot, probably 200 pounds. I might be wrong on that. Maybe like 180, but he's a bigger defenseman who also has some talent, but he's not the same as Yoki Haru or Mitchell or Boquist. So that would give a lot of flexibility for the Hawks to really start dealing those defensemen for other forward depth. But yeah, today was definitely a tough day.
We got your
Twitter
back.
feed was blowing up, and I was trying to get into a lot of the comments, but I couldn't really keep up. And I know that you helped out a lot on Facebook, kind of talking to people there. But I think we're all thankful that people chimed in and voiced their opinion, even though it might have been different than ours. We like the conversation, and
Aaron, you put an article out there that was thought provoking, and posed a hypothetical scenario that unfortunately some people just aren't prepared to handle, and so they want to shoot the messenger. There were some people who thought it was an interesting discussion, and that's all it was. It's just so funny. I mean, some of the responses, that the most recent is one that alleges that everybody at the rink wants to trade Kane, which is not true. There's not one person at the rink who wants to trade Kane. You wrote an article that talked about a hypothetical scenario where Kane might be traded. And it's, sometimes Hawk Twitter just goes completely off the rails, and this is a case where it does. But you know what, Aaron, like I said to you, I mean, you always want to be the guy who writes the articles that are thought-provoking and not necessarily, popular with the mob mentality, and which is, the fanboy fluff that all the idiots write. So congratulations to you. You write stuff like that. It's not always going to be popular. It's not always going to be well received, and you're going to get some shots for it. But at the end of the day, you're taking a point of view that takes some guts to write, and I salute you for it.
Well, instead, you could be a big wimp and you could write about, puppies and all that other garbage and fluff, and how Eric Gustafson's so wonderful and he's the next Norris Trophy winner, and how you were in first on Colin Delia, you fucking jabroni. Honestly, you could kiss my ass. How about that? I'm not going to wax poetic on that.
I would call that waxing poetic.
Yeah. So anyway, whatever. We're going to have to fire up the jabroni of the week again, but the jabroni would be the same every week. Usually.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
People would get bored, So
yeah, anyway, I can't even. You know what?
Talk about it.
Jabronis like that make me like Laz. So.
Oh. Y'all need to take a hit of this Jeffrey. It'll calm you down.
All right. Well, I think
now that the jabroni's out of the closet.
Yeah, we got a couple questions. Let's try to get into them. We're going a little long here, but let's get into them anyway, and Aaron can jump into. Ideally, Ken Collenbach. Ideally, defense in 2022 is Boqvist and Mitchell, Beaudin and Yokiharu, Dahlstrom/Hillman, and Murphy. Okay. Likely at least one of them doesn't reach expectations. How many fall short? Which ones? I am not on the Beaudin boat. I hear all these good things about him, and sure, he puts up some decent numbers where he's at in junior. I don't know that I'm a big Beaudin guy. I don't have anything against him. I just get a feeling, and when I get a feeling, I go with it. I got a feeling with Anton Forsberg that I didn't like him. There's just something about him I didn't like, and as it turns out, it looks like I may have been right, but that doesn't mean I'm right on Beaudin. I just think out of that group, maybe Beaudin isn't the one that sticks around. Boqvist is a high-end talent. Mitchell, everything looks good. We liked him in camp 2 years ago, right, Aaron?
Yep.
And Yokiharu, he looks like a good. And he's not a Boqvist type, but he could be like that Seabrook light type possibly. And who knows from under there? I mean, Murphy, that was the one thing that I kind of found where it's like, oh, you got to get rid of Murphy. You got to get rid of like, why are we getting rid of the younger, like, defenseman who has a little bit of physicality in his game? Why would that be the defenseman they got to get rid of? Like, why wouldn't you want to keep him? That didn't make any sense. But what do you guys think?
I don't think that's going to be the defense in 2 years. I think some of those guys are going to be there, but I have a feeling that there's probably going to be a name or two on there that's not currently in the organization, and a name or two in that list who will no longer be with the organization. That's just kind of how it always works. And I still think that they need at least one top four defenseman or top four defenseman prospect who's not currently in the organization, who is, fills that Nicholas Hjalmarsson, young Brent Seabrook, because I don't think they have really a young Brent Seabrook. I don't think Joeckel Harju is that kind of player, but he's going to be a really good player. He's just not as that physical presence that Seabrook, is, and especially was when he was younger. And he's a really good player, though. I like him a lot, actually. But so yeah, I would say 5 out of 7 is accurate. But or maybe 4 out of 7, because I'm not sold on Bodin either, because his skating is not really that great, and you can get by with that in junior or even in the AHL. But it can be a problem in the NHL where stuff like that tends to get exposed, especially in a defenseman.
Aaron?
I think one name that might be there still could be Dennis Gilbert. We don't really have a player like him that could be a solid 4, 5, 6 guy who's just stay at home, big, doesn't score a lot of points, but has good plus minus. I had a love affair with Stephen Johns, and I was really upset when he went in the Patrick Sharp deal to Dallas. Reading his numbers, last year, 75 games, 15 points, plus 10. I mean, these are the kind of guys we need. We can't go on the road to New Jersey and score 5 goals on the road and lose, 8 or 9 to 5.
8.
That's embarrassing.
Yeah, it is.
We need guys that are hockey players. We need tough guys to clear the net, block pucks, and get the puck to the forward so they can score goals.
Yep.
That's it. That's the secret sauce right there. And I don't need a defenseman that scores 50 points. I don't care. It's not what you're getting paid for. You're getting paid
to do the other stuff too. Then yeah, great. But yeah.
Yeah, you need a variety. You can't have all of the same player at any position. You need some variety. You need a little bit, variety is a slice of life, right? Is that what they say?
And the Blackhawks style now is to be a quick, hybrid type team where the defense jumps in a lot. That means the forward group has to be as committed to defense as the defensemen are, and they're just not, right? Eric Gustafsson jumps in on a play, and that leaves Dominic Cahoon to play defense. That guy's not blocking pucks. It's just kind of a flawed system right now. So I think to answer your question, I think Mitchell is definitely going to be a Blackhawk for a long time. I don't know about Connor Murphy. It just seems like he's here and he's on the trading block next week. Who else? Joeckel Harju. I think he's just still developing. I'm sure he'll probably still be here, and some of the Boquist, some of the other guys. But yeah, we just got to focus so much more on defense and toughness, and not necessarily fighting, but just being tough on the puck. I mean, Connor Murphy does that already, but I don't think one guy can create a culture of you're not going to score on us, and that's something we really need.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if they do what we had hoped, that they could pick up some decent defensemen in, through trade or whatever, that kind of gives a little bit of variety to that defense, a little bit of more of the physical side, because possibly, Dahlstrom is what he is. You've seen he's slow of foot, and he may not be that, long term. He may be the next, oh God, what's the guy that's in Carolina or was in Carolina? Klaus Dahlbeck. Yeah, Klaus Dahlbeck.
Dahlbeck. He's probably better than Dahlbeck. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to say that he is, but yeah. He's probably never going to be more than a third pairing guy, and because I'm not sure his mobility is all that great either. I think that's been the knock on him. And but again, it just the defense is a huge question mark for this organization. It really is. And much has been made of all these guys, these young guys. And I know, Aaron, you're a big fan of Ian Mitchell. And I, personally, I think Boqvist is almost a can't miss player. I think the only question about him is if he can sort of keep his brains unscrambled, because he's had a couple of concussions. But other than that, I think he's going to be phenomenal. But after that, it starts to get kind of iffy. I mean, I don't think Beaudin is a sure thing. I don't think that Chris is necessarily a sure thing. And a lot of those guys have, sort of play a similar game and have a similar profile. And, Murphy, I don't know. I like Murphy. I think he's okay, but I don't think he's a special player. I don't think Dahlstrom's a special player. And I feel like they need one or two more defensemen who are really, difference makers and are going to be difference makers in the NHL, and not just as offensive defensemen. They need those guys who are going to really make a difference defending, which they don't really have right now.
No, and their goalies, and I mentioned this with the stats, like they give up the second most shots in the entire league.
Yep.
And it can't be like that going forward. If you have a bunch of miniature guys out there who don't block shots, who are more on the offensive side, they're smaller players, like generally those guys don't block a lot of shots. Occasionally they do, but generally they don't. Who's gonna? I mean, the Blackhawks are not gonna win games 6-5, 8-7. Like, you can't do that. You could do it in the regular season, but good luck in the playoffs trying to do that. You're just gonna get slaughtered. Like, that's just if you know hockey, you know that that's not how it's played in the playoffs. Like, games are tight. You got to block shots. You got to sacrifice. Like, these guys are not those. Most of those guys are not that type of player, which is not the end of the world. Patrick Kane is not LC Cord. Like, that doesn't mean he's bad. They all have their place. You just can't have a bunch of guys that do the same damn thing, and then you got one or two guys who do something else. Like, you got to spread it out a little bit. So I really honestly think they're going to use something like Beaudin or something like that as trade chip. I know you don't want to hear this, Aaron, but they could do the same with Mitchell eventually. And that's not to say he's not a good player, but they could do that. If that's what a team wants. If Ian Mitchell comes in looking better than Beaudin and they want Mitchell, like, Stan might be like, well, we've got Boqvist. Maybe we can, let Ian Mitchell go, but for a good return. So
right. And I think we're gonna look back at last year's draft and realize how many of these types of players that we passed up on. Like, I know John was really high on Noah Dobson, Evan Bouchard, and even later in the draft, the Rangers took K'Andre Miller at Wisconsin, and in the early second round, even Matthias Samuelsson, who went to Western Michigan. I got to see him play when they came to visit Denver, and he's a big defenseman. Decent speed, and just plays a really low risk game. I mean, he just reminds me a lot of Ekholm, and just a big guy, great first pass, doesn't let you stand in front of the net. And I think a lot of those players were like that, and we just chose on drafting smaller defensemen, and I just wonder if we're going to regret that.
Well, John and I were both big on Dobson.
Yeah. I was higher on Dobson than I was on Bouchard. But it's all a little bit of a crapshoot when you draft these guys because they're so young, and but I mean, Dobson just seemed to have everything right, the size, the skating, the ability, the competitiveness. But I mean, they got the guy that they had graded higher than him, and Bowman's a big believer in, driving possession up the ice, and keeping the other team pinned in their end. It's some of the best defense, and there's a strong measure of truth to that. But we'll see.
Yeah. Next question. There are actually two of them in a row. Jakey Davis and Johnny Uto, our favorite Artemi Panarin apologist. Basically, it's both. Are you concerned with Patrick Kane's minutes, the amount of minutes he's playing in a game? He played like 28 last game. Are you worried about burning him out? or worse yet, risking injury. I hate to seem callous, but no, I'm not. Why should they be? Why does it matter? I mean, if Patrick Kane gets hurt, sure, throw him on long-term injured reserve or whatever, and then that's that. Like, it's not risking your chance at making the cup, probably in the next 3 years. So it's like, why? Maybe he should be concerned and his agent should be concerned. I'm not concerned about it. Do what you know, if you want to use him, if you want to play him every shift, play him every shift. Who cares at this point in time? You know, that's kind of the way I feel about it. What do you think?
Are you asking me or Aaron?
Either one.
Aaron, why don't you jump in on that one, buddy?
Patrick Kane likes playing hockey. He's never going to complain about being double shifted. I don't know.
Yeah, we shouldn't be concerned. I think it's, you know, if the Blackhawks were, say, you know, a serious playoff contender and maybe, you know, could possibly go over the hump, then maybe I would say, yeah, you might want to save him up for the playoffs. But now, what are you saving him for? You're not saving him for anything. Play him. Go ahead, play him. You know? I mean, unless you, like, really want to literally tank and you want to admit it and you want to sit them so that they lose. But that's not going to happen. So, just, you know, play him. He's got him. You have him at your disposal. You're paying him money. Just play him as much as he wants to play. It's kind of the way I look at it. So, anyway. Do you guys think Stan Bowman will ever get away from drafting Smurfs? This team is Charmin soft and gets pushed around way too much. We kind of talked about that a little bit. We don't need to get back into that.
But you know what? I don't know what it is. At some point, I mean, it's almost like he's making a bet that they're going to change the rules of hockey and just take physicality out of it, because it's almost like if he's got to choose between a great player 6'3" and a great player is 5'8", he's going to take the 5'8" player. And it's weird. It's all I can't quite figure it out. And I do, you could see the vision he has, which I talked about a minute ago, that, speed and transition and driving possession up the ice. I totally get it. But at the same time, it's still a physical sport, and there's still a lot of important work that's done in terms of keeping the puck out of your own net and things that it takes to do that. And I don't know, because a lot of these players that he's drafted, these smaller players, they don't pan out. We talked about it last week, Schmaltz and Teravainen, and then Hartman's not really tiny, but all three of those guys, first round picks, all three of them gone. And two of them gone at least because they really didn't want to play a physical style of hockey in Chicago. So, I don't know. Well, good question.
You brought up the GM thing before, Aaron, and the kind of thing that I thought was Mark Hunter would be great because he works so well with young players and stuff. That's the kind of GM I'd like to see, in a rebuild. But the chances we're going to get something like that is slim to none. Jake Pro, way back from the Puck and Hassle days, the original super fan. Why do we not see more teams picking up players on waivers? It seems we hold our breath for a lot for no reason. Well, first of all, the players are on the waivers for a reason. Like, they're undesirable to the team. They don't care if they're put at risk to be taken off of waivers. So there's a reason why. Goalies are taken. There were a lot of goalies taken this year because people needed goalies. Well, if there was a run and people needed centers and Artem Anisimov was on waivers, maybe a team would take a flyer on that. But there are restrictions as well. Like if you get, if you claim a player on waivers, there's a certain time period they have to stay in the NHL. So if you get one of those tweener players that you want to use for a week, then you may have to leave them on your roster for 4 more weeks or whatever. I think it's a month that they have to stay on the NHL roster before you can send them down. But then you got to put them through waivers again, and you could risk losing them then. I mean, it's just all it is what it is. You guys got anything other on the waiver thing?
Not for me.
No. Okay. Aaron Lewis, is this new Slater an actual player moving forward or place filler? My honest opinion, I thought they were just going to send him down. I thought they were going to put him through waivers and send him down. I thought they were just basically trying to unload Ruda's contract, and I don't know that they necessarily cared what they got back. They just want to get rid of him. But they ended up having to take a contract back that Tampa Bay didn't want to throw through waivers. I thought the Blackhawks may just say, hey, do the same thing they did with Jason Garrison. Try and throw him through waivers. If someone takes him, someone takes him. But if not, send him down to Rockford. He could be depth down there. His contract's up after the year. I don't know. If they're going to give him a heavy dose of ice time to see what they got in him, and they want to use him next year, maybe they do offer him a contract because he's a UFA, I think, not an RFA. So, basically, they would just have to, sign him to a regular contract, which is going to probably be under $1 million. He was a former first-round draft pick. It's taken him in 2012, I think. It's taken him this long to get up to the NHL. Something's up. I don't know. I think either way. He could be like Anthony Duclair, So, what were you saying now?
I was saying I thought it was just a salary dump. I mean, we just signed Ruda. And I don't know. I think it was I don't think they were trying to trade for him. I think it was just getting Ruda out.
Yeah, and
I
think
talked to his agent and was like, just get me out of Rockford right now.
Yeah, for sure. That's kind of what I thought it was. So, I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't plan on anything from him. If he goes out there and plays, maybe we'll see something, but I would not expect much out of the guy, to be honest with you. So don't go out and buy your Slater Cuckoo jersey or anything like that, because you may regret it. Cuckoo. John, I don't think you have anything more to say about Cuckoo, do you?
I have nothing further to say about Cuckoo at this time. However, I reserve the right to speak more on Cuckoo at a later date.
All right, I think that wraps it up. Aaron, you got anything else you want to bring up before I get into my final countdown?
No, just thank you guys for having me on. It was a fun day, and I'm glad we stirred up some conversation with some people. So.
Yeah, it's just one of those days. All right. Well, you can find all of our wonderful, comprehensive content, including Aaron's illustrious piece, over at www.the-rink.com. You can also find a piece that Ray and I threw together on Matteo Petronero. I think that's how you say it. Petronero. He's the captain of the Chicago Steel, a kind of under the radar kind of guy. Kind of gets overshadowed by some of the bigger, flashier names and stuff. But a good, solid two-way defenseman. Has a little bit of an offensive flair to him. But you guys can go out to the ice rink out here in Geneva, and you can see him play. He's a really good player. Check him out, but check out the article as well. You can find us on all the popular social media, at The Rink Official. The Rinkcast is at The Rinkcast. I'm at Puck and Hostel. John, you are at Jaeckel, Jaeckel. Aaron, you are at Late in the Goalie. When you want to send all your angry tweets to Aaron.
Yep.
But don't do that, honestly. I kid, but don't harass poor Aaron just because you wanted to open up a little bit of dialogue. He had good intentions. That's what I want to say. He had good intentions. And I don't know if they were necessarily recognized. So if you get a chance, please head over to iTunes, rate and review us. I'll read them on the air. If they're good or bad, I don't care, whatever. At least if they're bad, make them interesting, not just F Gatekeeper. I get that every single day. So,
all-knowing people on Twitter.
So anyway, get over there, rate and review us. It really helps us out. It helps us move up the rankings. We get more listens. That's really what's important, that we get our voice out there. If you like to listen to us, help us get out there a little more. And that's what you can do to help us out. So I don't know. I would like to. I know John's going to say this as well, but I want to shout out to puckhockey.com, puckhcky.com. Use discount code The Rink. You can get your Rinkware if you want to support us that way. That's also very nice. We very much appreciate that. We're going to be hitting the final. John's great trade deadline content is going to be coming out real soon, so that's going to be good.
Well, let's not set the bar too high. The old rumor mill's been kind of quiet this year, but I'm asking around, and maybe we'll have some information over the next few weeks.
Yeah. We're going to try and get some other people on. We'll see what happens. I got one in mind. We'll see if he's available. We're going to try and have more guests on for you. So we're going to give you a little bit of variety, not just me and John being angry and
being negative.
Yeah, we're worse downers than OxyContin or whatever the fuck that garbage was. We're not always. We want this team to be good. Like, that's what the ultimate goal is here. We want the team to be good. We want them to build it up appropriately, instead of just being the Flyers who sit in the middle of the pack.
So many of these comments are not about what we're saying. It's something else.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just an issue that the responder has, and it is what it is. It's fine. Whatever.
Yeah. So that's it for plugs. John, you got any other plugs you want to do? Or you got it?
I want to say thanks again to Al for coming on.
Al is awesome.
He's always the best, and we're gonna keep on bringing on the good guests. We got a commitment from former NHL tough guy John Scott and his people. We're just trying to sort of find the time to get that done, and we got a whole long list of other people we plan on bringing on. We've got commitments from, and so we're just gonna keep doing what we do. And
for sure. Yeah, and feel free if you guys if there's a guest that you guys think we would be, throw it out there. You never know what can happen unless you ask. So, so we'll see what happens with that. But I do want to echo what you said about Al, and he probably thinks I'm nuts because I'm always referring to him as Uncle Al, but he's like, there's Bob McKenzie. I call him Uncle Bob, and Al, I call him Uncle Al because they're like your uncle that always imparts that wisdom on you. And that's what it always feels like to me. It's like you just want to sit down, and I know this is a weird thing to kind of say, but it's like you don't want to sit on his lap. You want him to tell you stories, kind of thing.
That's kind of weird.
But he is. He's like your uncle.
You can fit in his lap. I can't fit in his lap.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I am miniature, and I know William J. LePetamine is gonna now come up with a Photoshop
that's gonna be a Photoshop.
Yeah, it's coming. But see, I can take it, so I appreciate it.
That's true. You have thick skin, my friend.
Yeah. Like a reptile. So
thick
anyway,
skin and cold blood, baby.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's basically it. And a black heart. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
It's all good.
Yeah. Well, as Steve Conright says,
we need some kind of energy, whether it's a shift, a good shift, a shot.
Aaron, you got any last plugs? Anything you want to throw out there?
I just want to thank all the Patrick Kane fanboys for the conversations.
And the jabronis.
Especially Talking Hawks, my boy John.
Yeah, John and Jaeckel are awesome. I like John and Jaeckel. They're nice guys. They're real super nice guys. And those guys, they're like super fans, but they admit it. They're blatant about it. Like, that's fine. Cool. That's fine. They understand what they are, and I appreciate that about them. They're good guys. I really enjoyed hanging out with them. I'm hoping to get out to Vegas. Actually, move to Vegas at some point in time, so we can all get the band back together again.
For sure.
But anyway, so that's it for plugs. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to download, listen, and support us. Until next episode, see you on the road.